Hey everyone, welcome to the Be Insightful in Technology podcast. If you're listening, this is actually part two of Rochelle Rivers' podcast. So, if you haven't heard part one, I suggest you go ahead and go check out that before coming to listen to this. You don't want to miss out on the information she has to offer, so let's get into it. How did you prepare for the technical? Like you talked about how like nobody really knew what the communications technician did. And then it's just like, okay, how did you get to, transitioning from doing the clerical work to the technical work?
That was a journey because as I mentioned, every time I asked someone what do they do, I kept getting a very generic, I don't know, but I think they make a lot of money. So I was like, okay, well, that was just fueling my desire to know more. So I started calling around. I decided to call into our HR center for training and none of this stuff was online in 96 because that's when it was for me. That's when I was doing all this calling. So I called into HR and I said I wanted to find out how does one become a communications technician. And the lady on the phone, she was like, well, you have to take a test, and when you take the test, if you pass the test, then you can automatically go into the system, which was on the phone at the time. That's how technical we were then, because nothing was online. Call in, you put in certain information, and then you ask for certain jobs, and the jobs come up. So I said, okay, well, how do I take this test? Or is there anything? She said it's a test about electronics and it has electrical information in it. And I'm thinking, I don't know anything about that. I said, well, is there any like study guide or study information or classes that help you? And she said, well, there is a little, we do have some information I can send you that gives you like a sample of some of the questions. And I said, okay. So she sent that to me, company mail. So I got it probably within the next couple of days. And it had like 4 questions, but this is a test that had like 150 questions on it. So 4 questions was not even going to give me an inkling of what I was actually looking, that I was going to have to actually do. So I called back and I said, is there any way or anybody that's offering any classes to help you prepare for the test? And she said, absolutely, there are. She said, as a matter of fact, there's one that's getting ready to get started. I'll give you the instructor's information. So she did. And AT&T has always been very good with training and offering classes and paying for classes and all of that. So I called the instructor, and the instructor says, she gives me some great information about the class. And I said, well, I want to sign up. What do I have to do? And she says, well, you can't. And I said, well, why not? The class hasn't started. It doesn't start for another week or so. Why can't I sign up? She says, because I had orientation this past weekend, and I usually don't let people in my class who don't attend the orientation. And I said, well, why is that? And she said, because I provide some information that I think is very helpful and very useful for the class. So I'm thinking, well, it's not the class. So what are you saying in the orientation that is necessary for the class? And so she said, I stress the importance of being in the class every day or every class session, showing up, being prepared, and being ready because it's a lot of information. It's very comprehensive. And when you start missing, you miss out on something that you will need for the next class. So if you miss a class and then you come back, you're kind of behind. That means everybody else would have to slow down trying to help you get up to speed so that the class will continue. I told her, I said, I'm a wife, I'm a mother, I'm also a full time student at Georgia State. I understand the importance of being in class on time all the time. I said, if you let me in this class, I will not ever miss a class. So after speaking with her for just a few more minutes, I think she felt a level of conviction, a sense of seriousness. And she said, okay, I'm going to make an exception this time. So I started the class totally lost. I had not ever done anything with electronics or with electricity or anything technical prior to then, but I had to honor my commitment of coming to class every week. So while I'm here, I might as well learn something. And I am fortunate that as I've gone through school, if I listened, I would always absorb and be able to take something from that. So I played that strength. I took lots of notes. I had a little recorder because we didn't have phones like we got today. So I had a little recorder that I could record and go back and listen to, like on the way home or once I got home or on the way to work, throughout the week, so that I could try to keep up to speed, because I was determined that I was going to become this person, this communications technician. So I was able to take the test. Um, and turns out I was the only one of the 7 or 8 people that passed the test on that session. I immediately applied for a job and I got it. They were taking people who could pass the test like that. I mean, if you could pass, then you knew that you were going to have a job, because they were waiting on people to pass the test. So once I passed the test, I got the job, I was there. But I will say this, that test had absolutely nothing to do with the job. And everything that I learned about the job was literally OJT. I learned it on the job. And I sat with other guys who had been technicians for years. They had, at the time, I probably had about 8 years service. These guys had 25, 30 years service. I'm thinking, oh my God, you ain't got nothing else to do with your life. You're going to be here forever. Who knew I was going to be one of those people? But, you know, they taught me well. They were willing to teach. But, they were guys, and they were trying to teach a woman in a very male dominated space. And I had to be thick skinned. I had to be, I could not show emotion that we tend to show. I couldn't get, angry or upset about things that were happening or weren't happening. I had to maintain my control of that, because I didn't want to be labeled and I didn't want to appear weak, like I couldn't handle it, because that's what I felt like they were looking for. As much as some were very helpful, there were others who were kind of sitting around waiting to see if I was going to fail, maybe even secretly hoping that I would fail, to prove that we didn't have a right there. And the crazy thing is, that was in 1996. Why are you still waiting on my failure? So I did get with some guys that were very welcoming and very encouraging and very interested in helping me learn. And that's what they did. They taught me what I needed to know. And it was in that process that I learned that not only is this exactly what I want and where I need to be, this role fits my personality. This is what I'm supposed to be doing. And that's when things just opened up for me. And I did really well. I did that job. It eventually, as hard as it was, it became second nature. I was doing it in my sleep. My bosses would come, hey, they would drop some big 3-ring binders off in my hand. I need you to learn this stuff because you got to teach it to the rest of the team. Because that was my space and I reveled in that. And I think when you get to that place, it makes the learning a lot easier. When you feel real comfortable and you feel real empowered to do your job and walk in that space, then it becomes very easy to do. So that's how I got there.
I love that, because it's what I've realized. Like when you said you went through the class, you took the test and you passed, and, some of the stuff that you even learned about may have not been applied towards the job.
Right,
And it's like a lot of certifications are that way, where people, take a certification and expect it to
right.
be just like that. But no, the experience comes once you get in the door.
OJT, on the job training, there's nothing better than that. And I tell people all the time that there are certain credentials that you have to have, whether it's a degree or a certification. They want to know that you have the capacity to learn. But ultimately, when you get the job, that's when you're going to learn how to do the job. Because every office, every organization, every company does things just a little bit differently. And they're going to train you to do it the way they want you to do it. Now, if you're wise, you'll realize that however I'm learning to do it, I can tweak some of this and take it to other companies or other organizations, maybe looking at things from a different perspective and all of that. But you're going to learn on the job. The credentials, they just want to know that you have the capacity or the propensity to learn. But the work, you're going to learn while you're doing it.
I like that you mentioned like having the capacity to learn because if you join any tech like sector, you have to continuously learn new
You
processes
can't
and just
stop.
new
You
tech.
cannot. You
Exactly.
cannot stop. How we do the job from 96 to 2023 has totally changed. I mentioned to you certain things that were not computerized. Everything I do now is on my laptop. Everything is computerized. So we've had to learn that you cannot be in the world of technology and think that what you know today is all that you're going to need to know for tomorrow because it's just it won't work. It
You
won't
know,
work.
so it takes a strong person to continuously learn throughout this industry.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And it's like even now we're witnessing the changes that like AI is gonna have with
And it's going to
implementing that into the
continue.
workplace. Yes, it
Right.
will. So another thing that I want to touch in would be easing into the next subject, which is like your thoughts, comments, and concerns with the industry. And we can dive into you were in a male dominated space, and most likely it's still male dominated now. And being able to go to the people who are actually supporting you and understanding like okay they might be looking for my downfall but there are people here looking to like lift me up and
Right.
continue the growth that's going that they see, you know, honestly a lot of people see that they want to empower women in these spaces.
Right.
So in our experiences going through looking at people empowering us and then pushing that forward to you know help
Right.
others climb in, what do you think that at least you're doing that's making impact with bringing other people into the space or at least empowering others?
I think the best thing that we can do in any aspect of life, and even specifically in this one, is to show up and be your very best. When I show up, not under any pretense or anything other than Rochelle doing the best that Rochelle can do, what it does is it presents the opportunity to dispel any myths that people may have about whether or not she can or can't. It it allows me to fully walk in that. And when you do that, people then see you and others potentially different because now they see, okay, not only is she here, whether I think she should be here or not, she contributes to the conversation in a very positive way. What we ask of her to do, she does it. She does it in a timely fashion. If she doesn't know, because the world of technology is very interesting, no one knows everything. There are certain jobs you can have, those clerical positions, you can know everything because it doesn't change. It's very mundane and very routine. But in the world of technology, you may be an expert on certain things, but because technology is changing so much, you don't know if something has changed, and that changes what you know or what you thought you knew. And the addition or insertion of equipment into a circuit can change how you troubleshoot. So if you were hooked on one way of doing things and now this new piece of equipment has been inserted, it's requiring you to do something different. You've got to be open, you've got to be receptive, you've got to be welcoming the change. And when people see that, I think that opens up the opportunity for them to remove stereotypes and say, well, maybe it's a good idea to bring more people like that into the organization. So I think that's the first thing that we can always do is show up and show up in a very well positioned light and let people see you at your very best. And I think the next thing that we can do is always be ready to mentor someone. I heard a quote a long time ago. I don't remember who said it. It might have been Maya Angelou. I don't know. I like a lot of her stuff. But she said we should always have one hand in the hand of someone who can lead us, and one hand holding the hand of someone who is following us. because as much as I am still growing and I want to do more, and there are other things that I want to do and areas that I want to expand my life in, I am where someone wants to be. So while I'm reaching for something else, I should be also reaching back to help someone who wants to be where I am, and keep that space open and let people know that I'm here, I'm open, and have those open and honest communications with people who express that level of interest. And one of the things that AT&T allows is, they call it an open marketplace, where you can go on and say, I want to learn how to do X. And if there's anybody that's in that space that is willing to mentor, they say, oh, hey, I saw that you're interested in learning how to do this. I do this. Maybe we can set up some time to talk and communicate. So it opens the door and creates opportunity for mentorship. But I think we all have to be open and ready and receptive, and recognize that none of us got to where we are alone, and that if it took help for us to get there, it's going to take help for someone else. And we've got to sometimes be willing to be that help.
So, showing up as your best self in the workplace. I know for a lot of women, like we kind of, quiet down in the workplace. We don't normally speak our mind. That's like the typical thing where it's especially
Right.
male dominated space. I know before we talked about how we bring dynamic thought process to the workplace, and like our opinions and thoughts should be heard. How do you think that it would be, I guess, a couple of things to help women actually speak up in the workplace to actually express and show their best selves? Do you have a couple of tips there?
I think the best thing that we can do is be confident in who you are and what you know. Excuse me. I think a lot of people suffer from, oftentimes, what is called imposter syndrome. And we might have heard that through our previous, well, my always First Lady, Michelle Obama, mentioning that even she suffered from imposter syndrome. And I remember when I read her memoir, and I'm thinking, okay, so you graduated Princeton undergrad, you got into Harvard Law School, and you graduated at the top of your class. How the heck are you feeling like you don't belong somewhere? But I think it's not a personal thing, it's more of a society telling a certain demographic that they don't belong. And we often take that on, especially when you consider the different microaggressions that we experience on any given day. But I think when we sit down and take assessment of what's happening, and we recognize that I belong at this table, and my voice is deserves to be heard, and we do a very good job of being prepared. I find that I am most confident when I am most prepared. And that means learning doesn't stop. That means it's almost 7 o'clock. But if I want to be prepared for my calls tomorrow, that maybe there's some things that I need to go read that VMware has, or understand their process a little bit better. If I've got a VMware call, or if I've got a Cisco call, maybe I need to go on a Cisco website and do some research and make sure that I am clear on the features and the products that we're adding, so that I can speak to them confidently. I think if we prepare ourselves with knowledge and information, and doing the research, and talking to or reaching out, how whatever you can find out, I think that adds to your ability to be confident when you step into that space and you have to speak. And as you show up confidently, people will receive that energy and see that you are confident in what you're talking about. And that demands a level of respect. And as much as some may not want to respect you, once they recognize that you are not going to get caught up with the emotional part of see me, see me, see me, but I'm going to say what I say, and it has some weight and some gravity. At some point, that level of ignorance will have to leave, and they'll respect you for who you are and what you know.
That's really powerful there. Like I'm working on the being prepared more part because as I've experienced my journey throughout work, I've always been in the let's learn, let's do this. And I think life has kind of shifted for me and I've put that to the back burner. But I realize how
Mhm.
important it is to step back into that space because honestly, I enjoy what I do so much to the point where I don't want to stop learning. So I
Right.
do want to step into that being prepared and speaking up more because a lot of the things I have thoughts and opinions but I
Mhm.
want to stand 10 toes down on what I
Right.
say. So that requires, learning and being prepared.
Right. Right. Because we're
So,
all afraid of just speaking out and being wrong. Because then you feel like you're going to be judged. Oh, she don't know what she's talking about. But the truth of the matter is, as I mentioned earlier, nobody has all the answers. And how many times have I been on the calls and someone would say something and then others would jump in to correct them because they were wrong. So that's not a negative thing, but the world that we live in deems that as a negative. So, and it has a negative association, a negative connotation, but we've got to recognize that those are often learning opportunities, that if I say it and I'm wrong and you correct me, I can't take that as it's negative. I've gotten corrected. Now I have correct information. And now I'm even more empowered because I have this new information that either I get and can process immediately, or now I can go look up and find out more information about that and bring that information back to the table.
oh, now that you mentioned that, I'm in the process of reading Lean In by Sheryl Sandberg. I think that's her last name. But I'm reading that book and it was mentioning how a lot of times, like as women, we take the negative feedback or being corrected as like an internal thing, something wrong with us, rather than, those learning opportunities. And once I shifted that, like I think I shifted that when I had my one of my internships where it's like you're learning and then it's gonna be, ups and downs. Like you're not, as you said, you're not gonna know everything. So once I
Absolutely.
shifted that, like I didn't take anything else to heart. It was just like, okay, there's just something you have to, fix. There's
You
something
got to
you have
learn.
to,
You have to
yeah.
learn. Right. I have a quote. I have a lot of quotes around my monitors in my office. And one quote I just happened to look at now, it says, all things are difficult before they are easy. And that's true. But if you think that you're going to go into it and it's not going to be difficult, you're setting yourself up for failure. You don't know what you're doing and you don't know what's going on, even if you are familiar with the overall process. You've got to learn how this organization does it. So there are things that you don't know. So when the correction comes, instead of just saying, well, why are they talking to me like that? Or, feeling a certain kind of way, just recognize all things are difficult and then they become easy. And you look back one day and you think, I remember when I thought I would never get this. And now not only do I have it, I'm a go-to person. I'm a SME. I'm now considered a subject matter expert. How'd that happen? But it does if you stay in, keep learning, and stay open to, criticism and correction.
Yeah. Oh, I know we're getting on for time. So I do want to get your tips on like how others can get to where you are. Like what tips would you like to give about 3 to 5 steps or
I
so?
guess a few tips to get to this place would, as I just said, one, stay open, always be willing to learn. Stretch yourself, be willing to get uncomfortable, be willing to be in an environment where you don't know. Choose being the little fish in the big pond because that's opportunity to learn and soak up knowledge and information. Be aware of the rooms that you're in and the conversations that are being had because that's how you learn what other people are discussing and what they're talking about. And network. Tell somebody who's talking about something that I don't understand it. Can you explain it to me? Can you help me understand? Reach out and make that because people don't know what you don't know. They don't know what you know and they don't know what you don't know. So you have to be open and you have to be willing. So continuous learning, keeping an open mind, being willing to put yourself in a situation where you are the little fish in the big pond. It's uncomfortable, but that's where growth occurs. And I guess one of the other things I would suggest is to as I mentioned, do the work. Do the work. Constantly be willing to learn, to study, to improve what your understanding and knowledge is of a particular subject so that you can feel like a subject matter expert as much as that is possible before you get into a space.
I like those tips. All right, let's get into the last segment of the podcast. What is a motivating and insightful quote that has helped you along your journey that you would like to share with others? You've been
Oh,
sharing
I
quotes
love
all.
quotes. I love
Yeah.
quotes. I love quotes. I'm a reader, and so I always have them. But one that always comes to mind that I always keep near and dear to my heart is from the book The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. And he says, once you decide you want something, the entire universe conspires to make it happen. And I think why that is so important to me is because I believe that whatever you want to do, if you want it badly enough and you're willing to do the work, the universe makes it happen. It pulls you realize I wanted to get out of where I was so much. I'm like, I want out of this space. I felt like my brain was just atrophying because this is a mess. I can do this job in my sleep. That was in the clerical roles. And I wanted out. So I went on a search. I went on a hunt. I started digging, and the universe just kept opening doors. Oh, well, here's some information. Here's some information. Here's a test. This is when you can take the class. But if I didn't want it as desperately as I wanted it, and was willing to do as much research and calling and reaching out, none of that information would have come to me. It came to me because the universe says, oh, you're ready? Because there's another quote. When the student is ready, the teacher will appear. The universe shows up with what we need when we put out what we want and we make our desires known. But you can't think that it's going to be dropped into your lap and you don't have to do anything. If there are certifications that you need to take them. If there are classes that you need to take those classes. If you want to get a degree, but make it be something that can be useful and beneficial to you as you move through life. And I understand that a lot of people don't know what they want, but the easiest way to figure out what you want is to try a lot of things and figure out what you don't want. So you keep moving, you do things. Oh, I don't like that. So I'm going to do what I got to do. And then I'll move on to something else. Oh, I don't like that. So as you walk through that process of trying to figure out, the universe starts opening doors. Things start synchronicity shows up and things start falling into your lap. And you're like, oh, why didn't I think about that? And then you realize, which is always so beautiful to me when I think about it, every single thing that you did along the way was a step necessary for where it is you're trying to get to. You learned something, you learned a skill, you learned a soft skill, you learned something that helps you when you finally get to where you think that's where you're supposed to be. Interestingly enough, when I was a technician back in 96, 97, 98, late 90s, early 2000s, I was a technician. And I remember working with a lot of the people in the field, getting those T1s installed. And we would work with the customer to make sure the service that they asked for was what they had actually gotten delivered. Because the salespeople, sometimes they don't quite get it right. They're busy selling, and sometimes they're selling more than what the customer needs, or maybe not more, but not exactly what they're looking for. And I remember saying at that time, these customers, they need to have, AT&T needs a job that is somewhat of a liaison between the customer and the salesperson that can clearly explain what it is the customer needs to the salesperson so that they can get that right, so that when we sell them, we're not overselling them or underselling them. We're giving them what it is they need. Fast forward, it's 2023. That's essentially what I do. But I had no idea at that time that this job even existed. And it may or may not have at that time. But every step of the way. And then here I am sitting in a role, and my supervisor says, hey, we got this project that's coming along. It's supposed to save the company so many millions of dollars, but we need some people who have knowledge of TDM service. Do you have any knowledge of that? I do. That's what I did. For almost 20 years in two different roles, but that's what I did. And his eyes lit up like it's so few people that have that knowledge today. And it is. Again, what I did then, I wouldn't, and when I left that, I would have never thought that what I'm doing now would require me or ask me to lean on knowledge that I had then. But yet here I am. So every step, although sometimes they may seem like a misstep, it's not a misstep. Take something from it, learn from it, put that in your tool belt, and move on to the next process. And eventually you find yourself exactly where you need to be, so long as you keep moving.
I really thank you for coming on to the podcast, because a lot of the things that you mentioned, I'm going through as well, when it's just like the transition period.
Yeah.
So I really do appreciate this, and I hope the listeners appreciate this as well. I'll make sure to include Rochelle's information in the show notes, so that way you guys can, check out her page or connect with her. And also the book that you mentioned, The Alchemist, right? I'll make sure to
Yes.
include that as well, because I'm a reader as well, and I love to
Very
share
good.
books. So,
Good, good. That's a really good one. That's one that I've read multiple times at different phases in my life, and I always get something out of it.
ooh, I am okay. I love that you said that, because, like, what is it? No Excuses by Brian Tracy was a book that I had read that kind of shifted
That's
my
a good
entire
one. Yeah.
energy.
Hmm.
And it's like something is like drawing me to read that book again. And as we said, when the universe, you put stuff out there and it's coming to you, once you want to learn something, the teacher shows up. I learn a
I
lot from
just am a
books.
true believer that what is for you, but you've got to be moving in that direction. And then the universe says, you're moving? Okay, well, I'm going to meet you where you are then. But if you're not doing anything, then the universe says, I'm just going to let you sit and do nothing for as long as you want to do nothing. So you've got to be moving forward. You've got to have some goals. You've got to have some plans. And everything you do, you may want to do this. I started out thinking I was going to be an actuary when I graduated high school. I am doing nothing like that now. That job probably doesn't even exist as I knew it then, because computers do that work today. But you have to have something that you're working towards, and the universe meets you and opens doors that you didn't know were going to open, and creates opportunities. But you got to know that, and you got to be willing to be proactive in your own life.
That's what this podcast is for, to help people become proactive in their own life. So,
Absolutely.
thank you, Rochelle. And thank you guys for tuning in to the Be Insightful in Technology podcast. Make sure to check out the show notes for all the information on like Rochelle's LinkedIn and the books mentioned, and just a general summary. So you guys check that out. A video version is available on Spotify if you guys are listening on Spotify. But go ahead and leave us a rating on the podcast. Let us know what you'd like to hear next. If anything, connect with me on LinkedIn, and I love to hear you guys' feedback and any suggestions that you may have. So also subscribe to the podcast too on whatever platform you're listening to. Shameless plug in every podcast. But thank you guys for tuning in, and enjoy your day.